Napoleon Bonaparte did not conquer Europe through military force alone. What set him apart was that he used the pen as skillfully as the sword, and the ledger as effectively as the cannon. While the thunderous roar of artillery filled the battlefields, a much quieter but no less deadly war was being waged in the background. This war was fought with numbers, signatures, and accounts. Armies were moving across maps, but at the same time, money was moving across tables. And seated at those tables were people whose names rarely appear in history books: treasury clerks, notaries, bankers, scribes, accountants. Because they worked behind the scenes, these people were invisible. They wore no uniforms. No statues were built for them. Yet they determined when armies would march, where they would stop, and when they would collapse. Because an army does not march on gunpowder alone. It marches on trust, and trust begins with money. By the end of the 18th century, France was a state that appeared strong but was rotten from within. For decades, kings had financed wars and courtly extravagance through debt. The problem was not merely borrowing, it was who the debt was borrowed from and who was forced to pay it back. The tax system was unjust. The nobility and the church were largely exempt from taxation. Money had to come from somewhere. The burden was placed on peasants and the urban poor. The people worked, produced, yet surrendered most of what they earned to the state. This imbalance could not continue. When the revolution erupted in 1789, the monarchy fell but the monetary system remained. The revolution changed the political structure, not the financial one. The new regime did not know what to do with the empty treasury it inherited. Their solution was paper money. These notes, called assignats, were backed by confiscated church lands. At first, they worked. Money entered circulation, and trade seemed to revive. But control was soon lost. The state printed more money whenever it needed it. The result, as you already know, was inevitable: inflation. People no longer trusted money. Wages were paid, but they could not be spent. Merchants refused to sell, peasants hoarded their goods. Armies received pay, but that pay had no value. And worthless money meant worthless orders. France had ideals but no financial backbone. In 1799, Napoleon Bonaparte entered the stage. He was only 29 years old. He was a soldier, but not only a soldier. He was a system-thinking ruler. He understood that power was not won solely on the battlefield, but also at the table. The first truth Napoleon recognized was this: before you govern a state, you must govern money. Before you discipline an army, you must establish trust in currency. Without trust, orders do not function. So as soon as he came to power, he took a radical step. He founded a new bank, but this was not like the elite banks of the old regime. It was neither fully state-controlled nor entirely private. The state and private investors worked together. This was a deliberate choice. Because Napoleon knew this, if only the state prints money, money becomes a political toy. If only bankers control it, the state becomes a banker's toy. Balance was essential. The bank's mission was clear: to discount commercial bills, stabilize payments, and issue banknotes in a controlled manner in Paris. The message was unmistakable: your money is safe. Your wages are spendable. Tomorrow, your money will be worth what it is today. This was a revolution without weapons, but the bank alone was not enough. Napoleon also rebuilt the treasury from top to bottom. Arbitrary spending ended. For the first time, who spent what and why was recorded. Revenues and expenditures were centrally monitored. Competent administrators were appointed. Figures like Nicolas Francis Moulin helped transform the financial system into a professional structure. The tax system was simplified. People paid taxes according to what they earned. Privileges were reduced. In 1803, a critical decision was made. The franc was pegged to gold and silver. This was not only an economic move, but a psychological one. For the first time in years, people believed that money had real value again. Contracts returned. Credit resumed. Trade began to breathe. Money was no longer a promise, it was a guarantee. Napoleon also conducted wars with this mindset. For him, war was not only a military front, it was a financial one. Defeated states were forced to pay heavy indemnities. Occupied territories covered the costs of the occupying armies. The front financed the front. As a result, tax pressure inside France did not increase. The state did not have to borrow endlessly. He sold Louisiana. Instead of clinging to an imaginary imperial possession, he chose tangible financial relief. Cities were reorganized. Trade routes were opened. Banking expanded. The economy was the second front of his strategy, often the first, but every system has its limits. Napoleon's continental system aimed to economically strangle Britain. European ports were closed to British trade. On paper, it made sense. In reality, it failed. Smuggling increased. Port cities suffered. Allies were crushed under economic pressure. The system harmed Napoleon's own side more than the enemy. And the final rupture came with the Russian campaign. The winter of 1812 froze not only soldiers, but budgets. The army vanished, supplies collapsed, years of trained manpower disappeared in an instant. The system financed by victory collapsed. No matter how good the accounting, extraordinary shocks cannot be prevented. Napoleon fell, but the system he built did not. The bank remained. The franc remained. The tax administration remained. Oversight mechanisms remained. France now possessed a financial backbone. The foundations of systems we still use today were laid there. Central banks, fiscal discipline, reliable currency, and predictable law. The lesson Napoleon left behind is clear. Victories are temporary, no matter how grand. Empires rise, armies march, and power can seem unstoppable, yet even the greatest growth can stall. Resources dwindle, strategies falter, and time erodes the strongest foundations. But one truth remains eternal: solid systems endure. They outlast leaders, survive wars, and shape the course of history long after the battles are over. True strength lies not in fleeting triumphs, but in the structures, rules, and institutions that sustain a civilization through generations.